Hi guys, welcome to the first lesson on a new topic, which is ecosystems. Hopefully this video is playing okay, and essentially what you need to do is you need to listen to my voice and follow the video through, listen to the key information. You're welcome to add notes if you'd like to as well. There will be points where I ask you to pause the video so you can answer a few little questions. Then at the end, there'll be two longer questions which you then need to upload onto Satchel One or Show My Homework at the end of the lesson as a little Word document or anything like that. So, today we're looking at the question, what is an ecosystem? Now, there's a good chance you might have heard this word before, but we're going to go through it anyway just to make sure we're really clear on what it means before we then carry on with the rest of this topic. So, the first thing we need to really understand is that an ecosystem is made up of two things. So, it's made up of abiotic, which are the non-living factors of an ecosystem, and biotic factors, which are the living things. So any area of land is made up of two different things, the abiotic factors and the biotic factors. So if you look at my little picture here, the mountain in the background, the pond here, the soil underneath here, they are all abiotic factors. The biotic factors are the living things, so these trees here, maybe any of the animal life inside the pond itself or the lake, and maybe any of the insect species or animals that are home in this forest as well. And essentially, an ecosystem is all about how those two things interact with each other. So if we look at that definition then, eco, or the term ecosystem, can be broken down into two words. Eco referring to the earth, and system meaning a series of links. So essentially, it's a series of links between an area of the earth. Or a better definition, perhaps, is this. So, an ecosystem is a community of living organisms interacting with the non-living parts of the environment. Now, I personally think we can do slightly better than that definition because what you could do is rather than talking about living organisms, you could use the word biotic, and rather than using the non-living parts of an environment, you could use the word abiotic. So if you want to talk like a geographer and use our posh vocab, that's what we do there. Now, an ecosystem can vary in size. Nearly everybody has heard about a rainforest before, and most of us might have seen a row of hedges outside our house or on our way to school. They are both ecosystems. Okay, so an ecosystem can be very, very small, like a very small pond in a park, or an ecosystem can be very, very large. And as I said, it's all about these interactions. Okay, so what the diagram here is showing is it's showing how the atmosphere, the animals, the soil and rock, and the plants all interact. So let's take the plants, the flora. Again, really good vocab to use there. Let's take a tree, which is obviously a plant. Now, the tree interacts with soil and rock because it uses its roots and gets its nutrients from the soil. The type of soil determines whether a certain tree can grow there. So the trees you get in the rainforest will be different to the trees you get in the UK. That plant obviously interacts with animals or the fauna. That's because think how much food comes from those trees. Let's say a squirrel or an animal in a British forest might rely on the nuts from a tree or the acorns. A caterpillar might rely on the leaves from a tree. So that's that interaction. And the last interaction is the interaction with the atmosphere and the plants as well. So, for example, when we think about plants or trees in particular, one of the main things about a tree is their interaction with carbon dioxide. So when it respires, a tree takes in CO2 and releases oxygen. And that shows very clearly how a biotic, the plant, and an abiotic factor, the atmosphere, interact together. And it's that interaction that makes it an ecosystem, and it's also that interaction that enables our life on Earth to really to prosper and do well. Okay, there are plenty of other links I can make, but hopefully that's quite clear there what I'm trying to say. So here's an opportunity now for you to do a small activity. What I'd like to do is, I'd like you to press pause on this video, and as you do that, either in your book or on your book, sorry, I'd take that completely back, you will not have your books. So on a piece of paper or on a PowerPoint, on a Word document, make a rough table. I want to see if you can add in the living and non-living, or the abiotic and biotic factors of an ecosystem. So pause the video, have a go at that, and then unpause me once you're done. Okay, fab. Hopefully you've had a good go at that then. So for the living side, we've obviously got the bacteria, the butterfly, the caterpillar, the oak tree, the mushroom, and the human. For the non-living, we've got our soil, we've got the sun, and we've got the rain as well. I also forgot a lion, although I'm not sure you'd find a lion near places that had humans, hopefully. Okay, so I told you that an ecosystem is about the interactions between organisms, so abiotic and non-biotic factors. And let's really look at this caterpillar then. So how does a caterpillar interact with its environment? Well, it breathes air, it feeds on leaves, it gets eaten by birds, it dies if it gets too cold, and when it does die, it decays, giving nutrients to the soil. So that caterpillar is interacting with the atmosphere, that's the air. It's interacting with the plants, or the flora, when it feeds on leaves. It gets eaten by birds as it interacting with the animals. And when it dies, it decays, giving nutrients to the soil. It's interacting with another abiotic factor, another non-living factor, and it's giving nutrients to that soil, which then helps plants grow in the future. And actually, organisms interact on a much more sort of basic level as well. So, what this is something called a food chain. And what a food chain does is it shows the transfer of energy between biotic factors. So the first thing in my food chain is going to be the oak tree. Hopefully you can guess what's going to come next, because there's only one thing on there that I think might feed off the oak tree, and that's a caterpillar. Okay? From the caterpillar, might be eaten by the sparrow, and the sparrow might be eaten by the fox. Now, bit of a misconception here. You'll notice that the arrow is actually pointing away from the original item. So most people would think that the snail, the arrow here, would go the other way around. People would assume that the arrow would go from the snail to the oak leaf, because after all, the snail is eating the oak leaf. When in reality, the arrows show the flow of nutrients, or the flow of energy. So as the snail eats that oak leaf, the energy is transferred to the snail, and then when it's eaten by the thrush, the energy is transferred to the thrush. So that's why the arrows are going in that direction. Okay. A few more key words here. We're going to focus on these two here. So that's what a food chain is. The other thing we want to look at is a food web. Now, a food web is basically the same idea as a food chain. It's just a little bit more complicated. So, for example, this here is a food web. Now, the reason these are used is because obviously if you've got some grass or some grasses in the bottom down here, okay, the chances are there's not just going to be one animal that eats that. So in this case, we've got the rabbits and we've got the grasshoppers as well. The way you look at these, though, is you look at them the exact same way. If I follow on through, the grass is eaten by the rabbit, which is eaten by the fox, or the grass is eaten by the grasshopper, which is eaten by birds, which is then eaten by the fox. Okay, so there are different routes for that energy to flow through. It's just food chains that are a little bit more complicated. And hopefully that should make some sense. Again, I'd like you to pause this video, and I'd like you to have a little research now yourself, any other examples of a food web. So see if you can find on Google Images or something like that, another example of a food web. Okay, hopefully you've unpaused me again. So the final task today then, what I'd like you to do is, based off that lesson, I would like you to now answer these two questions. They need to be answered on a Word document, on paper or PowerPoint, it doesn't really matter, and uploaded to Stature One or Show My Homework. Okay, you don't have to write the questions out. You can just write 1 and 2 if you'd like to, but they need to be submitted so I can have a little read through them and a go. Any questions you have about this lesson, feel free to join the Zoom link, which will be posted in the link section on this page. And other than that, hopefully you should be able to have a fair crack at this now.